Dark description. A Texas abortionist describes manipulating an infant's body in the womb, hoping to harvest its brain. Grave situation. The Holy Father supports Chaldean bishops in their struggle with a fanatical hatred sown by terrorism. Tragedy inspires activism. A victim's family reluctantly wades into the gun violence issue after a heartbreaking loss. And World Series pep rally. The Mets get a rousing send-off to Kansas City for Game 1 against the Royals tonight. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 27, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A new undercover video is released today, further revealing the possible sale of infant body parts by Planned Parenthood. In this 11th video, we see a Texas abortionist describing a partial birth abortion. She talks about how she hopes to yield an intact head to harvest the baby's brain.
I haven't been able to do that yet.
Oh, to get the calvarium?
Intact.
It's like, maybe next time.
I know, right? Well, this will give me something to strive for.
You hear her conversing with David Ewtn of the Center for Medical Progress, who's been posing as the buyer. In an earlier conversation we had with Ewtn, he hinted this new video would be coming. He also explained why he wasn't testifying yet before a congressional committee investigating Planned Parenthood.
The answer is because I actually haven't been called yet. None of the actual committees, the full committees that are investigating Planned Parenthood right now, have called me to testify before them. If and when that happens, I'm happy to do so. But so far, it hasn't happened.
I wonder why at some of those committee hearings they just don't show some of the videos that you produced and ask for reaction to them. Do you know why?
Yeah, well, I think that Congress has a specific way that they do things and a way that their process works. I have been very pleased to see that as the hearings progress, more and more of the videos have started to be shown. So I think that maybe there's just a learning curve there, and I think that they're figuring out how to work that into their process. So I'm confident that we'll see more of that in the future.
It's been more than 3 months now since the first video has been released. What has the impact been?
Well, I think the impact is just incredible. First of all, it's completely changed the national discourse about abortion and the way that we talk and think about unborn children and our policies around how and how often we allow them to be destroyed by abortion. I think that it's forced people to take a second look at Planned Parenthood and what's really going on behind closed doors at that supposedly mainstream organization. It's even forcing policy changes at Planned Parenthood and retreats from their normal talking points because they know that that's the level of scrutiny and scandal that they're now under. And I think that we're going to continue to see as the select committee in Congress continues to investigate, as more evidence comes to light. I think that the case against Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is only going to get stronger and stronger, and more Americans are going to realize that.
Do you have more? Will there be more videos released, or are you dealing with legal restrictions at this point?
The answer to that question, to both of those questions, is both. There is a certain amount of footage that is that's under a TRO and a federal lawsuit, but there's also plenty of footage that's not. So everyone can definitely expect to see more videos from the Center for Medical Progress coming out in the near future. Well, I know you wanted to make a difference with this project. Has it surprised you how much of a difference you've made in this debate? Definitely. I think that everyone who worked on this project knew that it was going to be a big issue and knew that it was going to be important news. But I don't think anybody expected to have 10 presidential candidates commenting on it in the first 24 hours. I was hoping for just one congressional committee investigation. It turns out there's now 5. Plus multiple state and local level law enforcement actions, criminal investigations, all of that moving forward. So I think the response has been incredible, and maybe the most incredible response is just from ordinary people from all walks of life who see these videos, who are horrified by what they're seeing, and they're really motivated to see something change because of that.
David Ewtn with the Center for Medical Progress joining us from Orange County, California by Skype. David, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's World Tonight. Pope Francis reminds Chaldean bishops that the only authority is the authority of service. The only power is the power of the cross.
Oggi la situazione nelle vostre terre di origine è gravemente.
The Holy Father lamenting the situation in their homeland caused by hatred sowed through terrorism. He urged the bishops to always keep before them the image of the Good Shepherd who is concerned for the salvation of his sheep. The Pope's message comes as European countries deal with a steady flow of migrants. Many of them are children and elderly people fleeing the Middle East. This large influx is straining the healthcare capacities of the small nation of Slovenia. It warns it will tighten border entry for migrants if an EU plan to slow the surge fails. Caritas teams from the Hungary branch are working around the clock to help those in need of medical attention. Since mid-October, more than 80,000 people have entered Slovenia. EU leaders plan to boost spending to provide shelter and other basic needs for the hundreds of thousands entering Europe this year. The man who oversees the world's response to the crisis spoke with our Jason Calvi today. Jason?
Brian, he's the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, and he says the world needs to do much more to help solve the crisis. His agency has a $7 billion budget. It provides food, shelter, and other basics to roughly 47 million people worldwide.
Good morning.
The refugees' long journey to find a place to call home. A song about being far from home, a feeling likely echoed by 15 million Syrians and Iraqis.
An enormous frustration because you are not able even to provide the core protection and the basic life-saving support to many of these people.
Antonio Guterres is the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees. Besides providing basic help, they also find international homes for some refugees.
It's also the most rewarding job you can have.
Religious freedom scholar Nina Shea says only 2,000 people fleeing the 5-year-long Syrian civil war are now refugees in the United States.
There have been a grand total of 53 Christians who have been resettled in the United States through the UN process. There's been one Yazidi. So the minorities are clearly being marginalized.
So why is that?
The Christians don't live in the UN camps. They don't seek shelter in the big UN camps in Jordan, for example. They find them dangerous places.
The head of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says people facing genocide need to be given priority.
Christians will not be forgotten. Certainly, to the extent that I have anything to do with it, Christians are not going to be forgotten.
The High Commissioner, who once was Portugal's prime minister, agrees religious minorities need to be protected at home.
We need to fight to create conditions for these communities not to be expelled from that part of the world because they are, I would say, absolutely central to the DNA of the Middle East.
And the High Commissioner says the most important way to stop the refugee crisis is to stop the Syrian civil war. He says it's suicide to let that war rage on. Brian?
Jason, did the commissioner have any other suggestions?
Well, he said the international community really is failing. He says that we need to invest, the world needs to invest in the countries that are most housing these refugees, which includes Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon.
Thank you, Jason Calvi. And the White House may launch a new strategy in the fight against Islamic State terrorists. The Washington Post reports senior national security advisors suggest a plan to move U.S. troops closer to the front lines in Syria and Iraq. That would put American boots on the ground in Syria for the first time, and it also positions U.S. advisors closer to combat zones. The changes would reflect an escalation of America's role in the war on terror in Iraq and Syria. Any actual shift in strategy requires the president's formal approval. China sends a warning to the U.S. tonight after an American warship sails close to a man-made Chinese island in the South China Sea. Beijing calls the action illegal. The South China Sea is contested by a number of Asian countries. The U.S. has called for China to stop building islands in that area. Catholic leaders from 5 continents asked climate negotiators to approve a fair, legally binding agreement that sets global temperature limits and decarbonization goals. The negotiators meet in Paris next month. The bishops asked them to heed Pope Francis's call to protect God's creation. The Pope says it is the poor who suffer most from its exploitations. The bishops drafted the appeal while meeting in Rome for the Synod on the Family. For more on the Synod aftermath, Dr. Chad Pecknold, theology professor at Catholic University of America, joins us. Chad, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from the final report?
The biggest takeaway is the huge improvement over the Instrumentum Laboris. Their working draft that all the bishops and cardinals complained about. they spent 3 weeks building up a quite beautiful text in many of the parts. And the big takeaway is this vast improvement over what the General Secretary originally provided.
Can you highlight what was said about marriage?
Yeah, the parts about marriage are absolutely beautiful. They talk about marriage as part of the creation, God's intentions for man and woman to be mothers and fathers to their children, for families to be the vital cell of society, and to be images of the Holy Family. Quite beautiful Catholic teaching displayed in the final report.
There were 3 paragraphs that I understand barely passed. What was in those?
Well, this is where all the attention is fixed, is paragraphs 84 through 86. Are paragraphs that, in one case, just won by single vote. So they're very tightly argued, tightly disputed paragraphs, which, on some accounts, allow the Casper proposal through the back door. And this is the concern, is that the Casper proposal, which is the view that those who are divorced and civilly remarried should be able to receive the Eucharist, that without their marriage being dissolved, being declared annulled. Yeah. So this is through the back door. The language is vague enough. There's procedures called an internal forum in which a priest can just say, the penitential path has been made that Casper wanted. This is seen largely to be a weakening of the Catholic Church's teaching on indissolubility of marriage. And so there's many who are raising concerns. Pope Francis calls for a listening church and a church which listens, and I'm sure that he's listening to these concerns about these paragraphs.
But this report is not binding. It's the Pope who will actually make an exhortation, probably?
Yeah, I think he will. The reports are that he will give a post-synodal apostolic exhortation, and he will be listening for how the final report is received. It's an advisory document. It doesn't have any binding authority, but it is the recommendation of the bishops who have voted in supermajorities for these paragraphs. He will receive it and certainly pray and continue to think about what the concerns are, where are the weak points in the final report, so that he can draft something which really does reflect the true teachings of the Church.
Excellent analysis, Dr. Chad Pecknold.
Thank you for having me.
The outgoing Speaker of the House offers a parting gift, or is it a gaffe? It's a tentative plan to fund the federal government until the spring of 2017. The man most likely to take over as Speaker doesn't like it, and other GOP lawmakers want more time to study it. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Lawmakers struck the bipartisan budget deal late Monday as a way to avoid a looming fiscal crisis. The agreement proposes to raise domestic and defense spending by $80 billion. It also raises the national debt limit until March 2017. Outgoing House Speaker John Boehner, the man who helped broker the deal, stands by the agreement, saying it's for the good of all Americans.
Now, the agreement isn't perfect by any means, but the alternative was a clean debt ceiling increase without any additional support for our troops and without any entitlement reforms.
It doesn't seem to be enough for some of Boehner's fellow Republicans, though. They are fuming and complaining the compromise gives away too much to their Democratic opponents. Even the man expected to take over Speaker Boehner's gavel is among the critics on Capitol Hill.
I think this process stinks. This is not the way to do the people's business. And under new management, we are not going to do the people's business this way.
Paul Ryan hasn't said if he'll actually support the deal tomorrow when lawmakers take it up for a vote. Many expect it to pass with ample support from Democrats, despite the disagreements among GOP ranks. In Washington, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, the Philippines to host the 51st International Eucharistic Congress in January. And arson attacks on St. Louis area churches bring denominations together. Today is the feast of St. Emelina, a religious sister who died in 1178. People sought her counsel because of her deep prayer life and gift of prophecy. Thanks for joining us on this October 27th. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, in January, the Philippines hosts the 51st International Eucharistic Congress. Following back-to-back disasters in 2013, the Archbishop of Cebu says he hopes people will be more aware of the importance of the Eucharist in their daily lives.
We have survived and we have walked the way of rehabilitation, even with the typhoon and the earthquake. Much of it is because of our faith. Much of it is because we gather for the Eucharist.
The Congress will be held at the end of the week-long celebration for the Holy Child. That's part of preparations for the 500th anniversary of the evangelization of the Philippines. Well, rewards totaling $9,000 have been offered for leads to solve a string of church fires in St. Louis. The most recent arson was at the Shrine of St. Joseph near downtown. Father Dale Wunderlich, rector of the Shrine of St. Joseph in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, joining us by Skype. Father, can you describe the arson damage to the shrine?
Actually, the shrine damage was pretty minimal, fortunately. The fire was set at the big double doors of the entrance to the rectory. And fortunately, our alarm system went off very, very well. Firemen were there almost immediately, within a couple of minutes, and were able to put out the fire without too much material damage. There's a lot of smoke smell in the rectory itself.
Has this been tied in at all with the other attacks in that area on different churches?
Yes, and that the modus operandi seems to be the same in terms of burning a church with some accelerant. We're kind of on the north side as well, although we're some distance from the other churches. But yes, we've been connected with the other 6 churches that have experienced the arson. Is anyone claiming responsibility? No one so far. At least the police haven't indicated that, and the investigation is pretty intense right now. So doesn't Jesus warn us that we're subject to persecution if we follow him? Do you see this perhaps in that light? I think some of the other pastors on the north side might feel that a little more intensely. I'm not so sure that it is some kind of a persecution. Could easily be. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of different opinions as to exactly why this is taking place, who's doing it. And I've chosen not to be too speculative about that. My only concern is that the individual or individuals just probably need a lot of prayer for healing. I would think so. So what good can we get from this kind of a situation, Father? Well, oddly enough, I've been trying to find the right adjective for this, Brian, and rather than interesting or odd or unusual, I've come down to unique. It's a kind of a unique ecumenical experience. The pastors and the congregations from these churches have gotten together for a major prayer service last week before the shrine was involved. But the day of the fire at the shrine, several of those pastors came down just to show their own support. And we even had some discussions about the fact that we, have all been now vandalized and therefore feeling a little victimized. And so we're feeling a certain kind of fraternity. The pastors are from Baptist church, Lutheran church, some non-denominational, Catholic, and yet we're one Christian church. And this moves us to pray together, for our churches and like for the perpetrator, for our first responders. So it's an interesting, unique kind of ecumenical experience. Indeed unique. Father Dale Wunderlich from the Shrine of St. Joseph in St. Louis. Thank you, Father. Thank you very much. And frantic efforts are underway in New Orleans to fix a levee damaged by the remnants of Hurricane Patricia. Parts of the Gulf Coast are also hit with strong winds and huge waves. Mark Irons reports.
Crews southeast of New Orleans are trying to plug a hole in a levee that broke during heavy rains. Water began pouring through the levee in Plaquemines Parish on Monday as rains from the remnants of Hurricane Patricia pounded Louisiana and other Gulf Coast states. Officials say the water could flood nearby towns and a main highway.
It would first cause a problem for Arlington, the community of Arlington, and then the residents on the west side of the highway, and then after that it would affect Highway 23.
The hole in the levee is about 5 to 8 feet wide, and officials say it's taking a lot of material to get it closed.
So we had to come back and establish a perimeter on the backside on firm ground, and that's where we are now as we bring in riprap, which is cement, and the asphalt bags and whatever we can get our hands on.
Officials say there's so much water in the streets that only big trucks can drive right now. Some residents also say they're stuck.
We can't get out our homes or in our homes.
The water that's in this neighborhood is on the streets is going to be trapped in here once they plug that breach.
The remnants of Hurricane Patricia also brought strong waves, heavy rain, and floods to the Alabama coast. Wind gusts as high as 40 miles an hour and 12-foot waves are expected there through Tuesday. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, gun violence hits close to home, motivating a victim's family to act. And the New York Mets are sent off to a royal reception in Kansas City for Game 1 of the World Series. Parents, can you waste time with your children? It's one of the most important things that you can do each day. A beautiful tweet from Pope Francis. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. As gun control debates divide the nation, gun violence is real and personal to some. Catherine Zeltner joins us, introducing us to one such family.
Brian, it's been 2 months since the shooting deaths of Allison Parker and Adam Ward. During an on-air interview, the Virginia TV reporter and cameraman were shot to death by a former station employee. Loved ones who are still grieving the loss are moving forward.
We received a call that no parent should ever receive. Our beautiful daughter, Allison, was dead.
Barbara Parker spread her daughter Allison's ashes 10 days ago. Today, she speaks at a gun violence conference alongside her husband, Andy. At 24 years old, their daughter was shot to death live on TV as 50,000 viewers watched at home.
We still cry. We miss her smile that could light up a room.
Many at today's D.C. conference have been personally impacted by gun violence, including Chris Hurst, who never planned to weigh in on the issue.
I'm not a part of any cause. I'm here as the love of Allison's life, and she's the love of my life. In trying to honor that and honor her.
Hurst is Allison's fiancé and an evening anchor at the same news station. The week of the shooting, he says, Allison wanted to make their relationship public to viewers. He said no, it might distract from her budding career. Now, he wants the world to know about them.
That's what brings me the greatest comfort right now, is to have other people know what we knew about Allison, which is that she was strong, she was fierce, she was tenacious, along with being beautiful and talented in her job.
Hurst won't stop trying to prevent gun violence and make sure Allison is never forgotten.
She was able to accomplish so much in her 24 years, and she went out going 100 miles an hour. So her parents and I are just trying to match that speed and trying to create a legacy that is greater than any of us could have ever imagined for her.
People at today's conference noticed how composed Allison's parents and fiancé are when speaking about their loss. Chris told me the adrenaline helps, but it's Allison's memory that keeps him going. Brian.
You and Allison close to the same age. Thank you so much, Catherine. The family of a little girl shot during an apparent road rage incident laid her to rest today. Hundreds attended a funeral mass for Lily Rose Garcia at the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church in Albuquerque. A week ago, police say a man fired a shot at the family's truck after arguing over a lane change, hitting the 4-year-old girl. Tony Torres confessed to the shooting and is charged with murder, among other crimes. A judge orders a psychological evaluation for an Oklahoma woman who slammed into a parade Saturday. She is charged in the deaths of 4 people, including a toddler. Dozens more were hurt at the Oklahoma State University homecoming parade. A judge set bond for 25-year-old Adacia Chambers at $1 million. She appeared at Monday's court hearing through video. Prosecutors request more time to interview dozens of eyewitnesses. They say one of the injured is in a fragile state, which could lead to more charges. Finally tonight, New York fans hold a rally at Queensborough Hall, sending the Mets off to the World Series. Former Mets reliever John Franco helping lead fans in a Beat KC cheer. Game 1 of the World Series against the Royals is tonight in Kansas City, where the first 2 games will be played. The Royals beat the Blue Jays in Toronto for the American League Championship. The Mets beat the Chicago Cubs in the NLCS. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on YouTube. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless you.